Let's take a look at how we can use Bookmap to get a directional bias in the markets. Now, to shed a little bit of context on what type of market condition we were in today, before we come back over and take a look at Bookmap, we can see we had a nasty red candle today. Here's the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ was down 1.86%. So wouldn't it be good to be able to use a tool like Bookmap to identify order flow in order to know, should we be a buyer or seller in the market? And I got to tell you, it's going to be much simpler than what you originally think. So now as we come over and look at Bookmap, let's talk about some of the components that we need to pay attention to first. For instance, look at on this chart, we do not see candles. Instead, we're looking at bubbles. You're just like, Mike, what in the world is the bubble? Well, this actually provides some very valuable information. The larger the bubble, that means the more aggression to that side. So in this example, since this is a large red bubble, that would mean there's more aggression on the sell side of the market. Just like we have down here, we even have more aggression down at this area. Now, when we see larger green bubbles like right here, this is aggression to the buy side. Now, we can't just blindly say, all right, we buy on green and sell on red. There's a little bit more complex than that because we need to talk about what is actually going on in order to make the bubble bigger or smaller in size. And what that is going to be is this is going to refer to the delta, how much delta fired off in this example. So the more positive delta or the more aggression of the buyers, that's when we're going to see a larger bubble. But something we can see quite often in Bookmap is sometimes we start off with a big green bubble and then it shrinks down to a small green bubble, or sometimes even red. That can be a big clue. Sellers are stepping in and the market's getting ready to run down. Now, I'm going to play with you guys a trade example. I think it was like an 8-second trade taken today on the live stream, but I want you guys to pay very close attention. Look at Bookmap. What are we seeing on the charts? And now let's go ahead and take a look at that trade. And then we're going to come back to Bookmap and show you how I could also an additional bias confirmation when I was taking this trade. NASDAQ short term is becoming overbought. I don't know how I feel about that though. And we're at the upper channel. Let's give it a shot. Come on. Come on. Let's go. There we go. There. Now, before I go ahead and break down the trade and how Bookmap could have been used for the directional bias, I want to let you guys know right now, My Funded Futures, you can get started for only $59 for the Core Flex add-on plan. Take advantage of this offer. Use the link in the description box down below. Use code Mike at checkout. So now as we come over to the chart and we look at the trade that was actually placed, here's the market right there. I got out right near the 200 period moving average on that trade. So what made me want to go ahead and take the trade? Well, we'll talk about Bookmap in a minute. But one, the trigger for me to take the trade was short-term overbought. I know that because the background color of the chart ended up being red. But then we come down here and look at the delta. This is going to be a delta indicator right down here. And notice we had a large delta right here. And as the market continued to grind up higher, notice the delta was no longer making higher highs, giving me a heads up that we may be getting ready to come down a little bit lower. But then we come over real quick and we take a look at Bookmap. Here's Bookmap right along that time period where I took that trade. And notice what we have down below us. We have large resting liquidity. And if we actually look over here on the order book, right over here at about 25,580, there's 1,017 contracts sitting there. If we look right down below that, we have another 513 contracts. And if I zoom this chart up here a little bit, where was the majority of the liquidity? Do we see any big resting orders above us? The answer is no. Now, the market's function is to facilitate trade. So quite often we see these large liquidity orders. Guess what? It becomes a magnet for the market. And you might say, well, Mike, sometimes they pull that liquidity. They do sometimes. However, it still acts as a magnet. Look right back here when we zoom out here, when the market was popping up, guess what? Where would our bias have been? Where was the majority of the liquidity? Well, right down here, we had 842 contracts, giving me a lot more conviction on whatever conventional chart I'm using to trigger the trade, that the market is probably going to head down in this direction. Now, that doesn't mean I necessarily have to trade all the way down towards that liquidity, but one, it can give me a good directional bias in what direction should I be trading. Do we see any large liquidity above us? Absolutely not. So this is telling me that conditions are favorable for the market to go ahead and continue lower. Then if you look throughout the morning, look as we continue to crash lower. Look how they kept trying to stack liquidity to the downside. And notice, what do? We kept go ahead and drawing on that liquidity. Now, here's where things start to get a little bit interesting. Notice we get a little bit of liquidity right above us. Well, what do? We came down, we rejected. We come back up, we hit that liquidity, and then guess what? We go right down again towards that larger liquidity level. Now, I want to draw your guys' attention to something real quick. I went ahead and fast forward, but look right down here at 1226. What did the market do? The market came down and grabbed that liquidity. And as I go ahead and move forward, do I see any other big orders down below us? I do not. But look what starts, coming up above us. We're starting to get liquidity above price. And then what does it do? It acts as a magnet, drawing price up towards that level. Look right up here, all the way going back here at about 1245. We have a major, which in terms is trying to attract price up towards that level. So one, we don't want to necessarily take the direction of the liquidity bias on its own. One, we want to use this as a roadmap, as a potential destination for the market. Then we want to dive down to our order entry chart, like I showed you guys in that trade example here, and then try to find trades in the direction towards that liquidity level.